Hello, everyone. My name is Maciej, and today I'll be speaking about the project we're working on together with Greg, who is co-founder. He's here. As you probably know, we've been running these Ethereum meetups for quite some time already. In Poland, we started them in Wrocław 2 years ago when Ethereum was kind of in a very conceptual stage at the time. However, due to my background, I used to work for Google in the past. Ever since I've learned about Bitcoin, and then of course Ethereum came, which allowed for many other opportunities. I was fascinated about this concept of whether it's possible to do what Bitcoin did for money, whether it's possible to do the same thing for companies like Google or Facebook. Basically, if it's possible to turn Google or Facebook into the protocol. So that was kind of the initial idea that got me really hooked since the very beginning. I've titled the presentation Building Google for the Economic Web. Unfortunately, I won't tell you today how to build this next Google. However, the problem we're working on is kind of the same problem that Google worked on when the Web 1.0 emerged. Basically, how to, given all these websites starts appearing, how you can improve discovery of the websites on the internet at the time where the primary discovery model of the web was through catalogs. No one remembers catalogs anymore, but at the time catalogs were the primary discovery model of the web. And what I'm going to be talking about is that basically today we're witnessing with the technologies like Bitcoin and Ethereum and the blockchains and all these tokens, we're witnessing the emergence of the economic web, which is a new kind of a web that kind of doesn't have a discovery model yet that is native to this new paradigm. So think of Bitcoin, you can think about all the technological infrastructure that is there, like the P2P network and transactions and mining. I won't be talking it's very important, but I won't be focusing on that layer during this talk. What I want to emphasize is what's really kind of, if you want to think about how to design the discovery model, you have to look at the phenomena that are emergent, that are happening on top of the Bitcoin network and Ethereum networks and all the other public blockchain networks. And it's like, basically what Bitcoin proved is that suddenly you can, using the open source software and through economic incentives embedded in the software, you can coordinate human behaviors globally using just the software and the internet. Introducing the token that has certain value, that acts as a reward for these behaviors, can introduce very interesting phenomena in the behaviors of people. You can basically change people's economic behaviors in the way that in the past only regulators, governments, maybe corporations could do on such a huge scale. So suddenly you have these networks of people who are, through these incentives, coordinated to achieve the same goal. However, the question is, what does it mean? What does it mean for the content discovery? And I'm going to argue it means a lot. Let's look at this. So this is basically the Web 1.0, like how it's all started, like basically where Google dominated. We had the web of documents, like the websites, with edges the hyperlinks between websites. Primary activity between websites was like linking. People were linking websites to each other, and the relationships were semantic. It's all about which websites shared the same keyword, and then Google analyzed the links that pointed to the same keyword and came up with the search, which basically dominated the entire Web 1.0 discovery model. If you give Google the keyword, and they provide you with the most effective way to discover websites that are relevant to this keyword. So this is what Google did. Then they came with the Web 2.0. And I'm just talking about it very broadly. It's like Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, everything that happened in the Web 2.0 was a discovery of content through a very different lens. Suddenly you have social relationships, and you give the platform your likes. You're not linking anymore. It's not a semantic relationship. It's a social relationship. I know this guy, and I know this guy, and I'm interested in this or that. And then you build this social graph, which is logged in the platform's databases, and they help you discover content through the lens of this social graph. And this is a kind of a social-based feed that we all know through Facebook. But if you think that you were discovering that, if you went like 20 years back, it wouldn't be very obvious for people that, I would be getting my kind of daily newspaper based on people's likes or what other people I know like. It was unimaginable. So what's really happening right now, that's the argument we make, and that is how we kind of look at the problem here, is that with this Web 3.0, we're witnessing the emergence of these economic networks. So basically networks of people who are motivated by their economic incentives, who are linked by tokens. People sharing the same token belong to the same economic network, and the transactions are like buying, selling, sending, holding. This is what are these transactions in these networks, but we're linked with the common interest. But the thing that we're missing right now, and this is the problem where we're focusing on, is like, if I hold a token, can I discover the web? Can I discover content on the web through the lens of this token? And I know it's very like, when I talk to people about it, sometimes people go like, oh, what do you mean by that? Like, basically, what I mean by that is that if you have a certain, like, if you own Bitcoin and Ether, can you look at the web from the perspective of these networks? And it's not like, not from the perspective of people who liked Ethereum or Bitcoin or on Twitter, but who are really members of these networks. In our model, we look at these, to use kind of a more familiar metaphor, we look at these networks as kind of distributed interest groups. Interest groups are like kind of organizations that existed always, but they were always focused on kind of, pushing some agenda within the government. Very focused, you know who these people were. Most of the time they represented some companies, and they wanted to advance their cause. Suddenly with these tokens, you have groups of people on the internet that are actively working to advance the cause of their token. However, the problem is you don't know who they are. Because as we're sitting here, probably some of you, I won't be asking questions, but probably you have some tokens. And we can have the conversations later on. And we're in a social setting, and you're going to tell me, this technology, this token is great, or you say the other technology or the other token is crap. But I don't really know what your incentives are, because you just have to have your private keys hidden somewhere. You're invested in something, so this token will change your. This is basically the incentive cost bias. If you have incentive in something, you tend to kind of convince other people according to your incentive. You're going to sell the view of the world which corresponds to your incentives, and this is how the world always worked. However, now we have all these networks, these distributed interest groups that on the internet will try to advance their cause using social networks and Web 1.0, like websites. But these networks are private. You see that there are people just using the example of the Bitcoin blockchain, you can look at the blockchain, you could look at the addresses, and you know that there is some value, there are some people there, but you cannot identify them. You don't know who they are. And the primary goal of these networks, so what these distributed interest groups will want to do is, their primary goal is to generate network effects around their tokens. So this is like, if you own Bitcoin, if you own Ether, if you own any other token, you will benefit from the network effects around the token. So this is why if you meet people who own tokens, they will always try to convince you, Bitcoin is great. Have you heard about Bitcoin? Have you heard about Ether? And I'm as guilty about, of that as anyone else. This is just the natural thing. People will go online, they will comment, but you will never know using the existing network, if you use the social media, who these people really are, and then you have these problems on Reddit and Twitter that you have all this noise and you have all these different messages coming from different people, but you don't know what their incentives are. So Ethereum is an interesting example of this interest group, which can spawn another interest groups on top of it. So you have this Ethereum network with the token Ether, which can create other tokens on top of it. So you have the interest group of Ethereum, but there are other groups who are kind of popping up within these ecosystems. So that's why we decided to, as I'm going to be explaining later on, to base our prototype on Ethereum. Because like, if you can build a solution for one token, it can really easily scale to these other tokens. So if you think of the network effect that these tokens want to generate, this network effect will rely on cooperation and coordination between all these different groups of people that are invested in the success of a particular token. So most of them will be like, there will be developers who develop the code base. There will be entrepreneurs who build applications on top of that use a particular token. There will be speculators, people who speculate, who provide like short-term liquidity, and so you can really easily kind of invest in and invest out of the token. And there will be long-term investors who provide like long-term capital. And from their, of course, there will be miners, but miners provide the infrastructure, so they are not really. I intentionally excluded them from this graph. From their coordination and cooperation, the network effect from their coordination, the network effect will really appear or not. So they have to cooperate. But there is one other group who is already present and it's already active, who plays like a role of a marketing department. They're content curators. So all these people who actually curate content related to particular token, people who post, upvote things on Reddit, people who comment on Twitter, on hashtags, Bitcoin, Ethereum, or any other token. But so what's happening right now, these content curators are actually contributing to the network effect of the external platforms. So if you want to talk, if you want to discover content, information related to Bitcoin, where do you go? You probably go to Twitter, you probably go to Reddit, you probably go to Google, and you're going to search for information over there, and these people will be active there. However, the problem is that the effects of their work, first of all, are located in databases of the external platforms, so they don't contribute to the data layer of their token, they're contributing to the data layer of the external platform, plus all these platforms are based, their ranking algorithms are based on social signals. These are all social signals that will be taken into the account where displaying what's relevant or not. And this creates a problem similar to, so imagine that you're with Apple engineers and Google engineers, Apple engineers and Android engineers, and you're discussing smartphone technology in a social setting. And they're going to tell you things, which platform is better, but without knowing where they work and what their incentives are, you cannot really determine the importance. Like, you cannot tell in which game they have their skin, really. But this is exactly what's happening right now with these tokens and the discussions that take place online. So the problem is that you cannot really distinguish, if you're a token holder, you cannot distinguish between members and non-members of your group online. It's like if you came to the Apple shareholder meeting and there are people from Google saying things and you think they're from Apple. This is exactly the situation we have. So I describe this problem as like, if she's my friend on Facebook, but her crypto economic interest, crypto economic meaning like, she has other tokens that I have, should I listen to her or should I not listen to her? Or like, but what we cannot really answer, like the thing that we're missing is that, if there is someone out there who owns 10% of a particular token, I own 10% of Ether, and he owns 10% of Ether, or maybe 1%, and he thinks that something is important, how can I discover that he's saying that? Today it's impossible using this existing platform. And the example of the effects of these competing interest groups working on the internet right now are the results that Google is giving you for token-based queries. If you type in Bitcoin is, Ethereum is, Dogecoin is, or whatever token is on Google, you're going to get is dead and is the future, is dying, is the forefront of digital currency. It's fascinating to see that, you know. It's like, because Google cannot pick up on these signals. Like Google doesn't know who's saying that, you know. I would like to ask Google, you know, where did they get it from? Like, you know, what were the interests of people who published these websites? I can't check that, you know. So Google is basically scanning the semantic relationships between websites, but without scanning economic relationships of people who were publishing this content. So this is the component that's missing. The problem that we're trying to, so after this introduction, is like, I want to kind of state the problem that we're trying to solve. It's like, you know, Facebook is solving the question, answering the question, who should I pay attention to? Given my limited attention that I have during the day, who should I pay attention to based on my social links? We're trying to build a platform on Ethereum that helps you build applications that will answer the question, who should I pay attention to given my economic links, which are links of a very different nature than the previous ones. So basically, it's how we're describing user feeds is it's a platform for content discovery applications, and I will explain what that means later on, but based on economic ranking factors rather than social or semantic. Because we believe that this is the missing component right now in the entire crypto space. And it leads to all sorts of different problems. Trolling on Reddit is just one, but the inability for communities like Ethereum, for instance, to decide on the hard fork, which is the kind of non-binding voting, really. And this was, you know, you could observe that a couple of months ago. There was no way for the community to kind of decide on things like that. You know? One thing I want to mention is that when you think about these problems, you need to distinguish between creators and the value of creation versus the value of creation online. Like the problem we're having right now, and this is like, this chart explains why Facebook and Google make money, and increasingly more money, and publishers are not making any money anymore. Like you're basically creating websites and you know, it's indexed by Google and all the money flows to Google. The problem we're having is that the information is growing exponentially right now. AIs are producing information. So now Google has this systems where they can take your photos and they will make movies out of it. AI can write articles. So there is an exponentially growing amount of information, but we have finite attention. So the biggest value add right now that you can have on the internet is basically telling people who should they pay attention to. Not producing more content, but providing the relevant content at the right time. And this is the component that we want to provide with user feeds to all the token-based networks. The way we do that, like the first step and the first realization that we had is that in the same way that basically, you know, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all the blockchains are based on the concept of timestamping. You know, so you are timestamping transactions into database. But this timestamping is right now related to financial transactions. So you're basically timestamping that something happened and the state of the network changes. In our model, we are talking about timestamping attention transactions. And I'm going to explain what that means. Basically, timestamping your likes. So the curators, and I'm using likes, we don't call them likes here, but just to give you an example of what we mean, like, you know, you're timestamping a signal that somebody should pay attention to something. You're linking, timestamping the link between yourself and the content you're pointing to. So the two main actions in user feeds are endorsements and backings. Every account, every token holder, so if you imagine, like if you own Bitcoin or if you own Ether, you have a certain account, you have a certain private key associated with an address. And right now, you consider yourself a token holder. But we use these accounts, we use token holders as potential content curators. So instead of sending some transactions to someone else, basically sending money to someone else, you can send a 0 Ether transaction, no Ether is being transferred, to timestamp a transaction that is pointing to the content. So in the metadata of the transaction, there is a link pointing to the content, and it is timestamped on the blockchain, so everybody's going to see that like forever. It just stays there. It's like basically linking from your website to some other website, but this is happening on the blockchain. So your identity is your account, you're pointing to content. When you are timestamping the link to another account, not to content, but to another curator, you're backing them. So you can imagine that, I have 1,000 Ether, and somebody has 1 Ether. But I think their curation graph, the curation job they're doing is really good. So I'm backing them. So I'm timestamping a transaction which points to that other person. Again, 0 Ether is being sent, but their link is there. So then what we do with it is we really do what Google did with PageRank. But we don't have the problem that they had. When they were parsing the web, so they were basically analyzing the graph of attention transactions, which are the links. They've analyzed the web graph, and then they could see okay, so the content and the websites that everybody's linking to must be the ones who are the most important. Basically, they assign the reputation to these websites. And we're doing the same thing. So we're looking at just by analyzing the timestamps. And these timestamps are just events on the blockchain. Again, no Ether is being sent monetarily, but just the reputation is being sent. We can just analyze them and see which accounts, which curators are the most endorsed ones, and what links have most backing behind them. And then, of course, we can assume different weights, and we can do all sorts of modification to this reputation system. But we have, just based on that, we have a very simple reputation system for content and for curators, which is on the Ethereum blockchain. And then, if you assume these links are, for instance, links to Twitter, and I'm talking about Twitter because we're already building our proof of concept based on Twitter, you can then have a perspective on Twitter, which is based on signals which are external from Twitter. So you have like an unbundled curation of Twitter based on signals coming from the Ethereum network rather than from the Twitter social network. So you can have a feed of tweets with the most relevant ones at the top and the least relevant ones at the bottom based on signals from the Ethereum network. And no Ether is being sent. So just like to imagine this is like imagine that right now you're thinking about tokens as money. Think of them as kind of just the reputation signal. These are just entries in the database anyway, but we have this metaphor of money, and money, if I have money and I give you money, I don't have it anymore. And if I have reputation and I point at you, I still have this reputation, yeah? It's like, it's just this different metaphor applied to the same thing, really. And this is what I really said. They transfer reputation and subsequently attention. I was like, and this is a really important concept. I don't want to go into the, you can watch the Epicenter Bitcoin podcast with me from a couple months ago, where I kind of focused on relationships between, attention, reputation, and money. Basically, you can say that Google, Facebook are these reputation marketplaces that drive attention to certain content. And if you have money, you can pay Facebook to buy reputation within the Facebook feed, and you're going to be seen by other people. But the assumption is that if you build any applications built on this graph, you can use this reputation system to drive attention to content which otherwise wouldn't be discovered in other kind of social reputation system and semantic reputation systems. So essentially what's happening that each token, and you imagine that you can create many of these tokens. It's very easy, you can create infinite amount of tokens on Ethereum. Each token becomes its own kind of media company with its own curation graph and its own index. So right now, Ether has all this information about Ether transactions in its blockchain. With this, it could potentially have all the index with content links on its blockchain tied to Ether. Or any other token, any other basically interest group can be an interest group with its token in the middle with this curation graph added to it. So the network effect hypothesis that we have here, and this is which is going to be, if this works, it's going to be big. This is the first thing that we want to test, is that if the curators do a good job, then it will draw attention to that index. If they are curating, this is happening on Facebook. Like, you know, if people are curating content, more people come to Facebook. And then it increases demand for the token, because to get this attention, you need reputation represented by the token. But the token is reputation and money at the same time, so you have to buy this. And that it means that the early curators get rewarded in the same way as early Bitcoin owners got rewarded, early Ether. Like with every token, it's the same thing. You know, if you're early, you achieve the network effect, you're being rewarded. So it means like the potential you can have better curation, and if you have better, so you'll have this cyclical, you know, circular economy really. Basically, it's the same thing as startups work today. However, there is no token, it's just a share. Like, you know, if you build an application that gets a lot of daily active users, monthly active users, and if investors see that there is a network effect, your valuation goes up. It's basically you just go to different people to get this money. In this model, the token is the reputation in the system, but it's also kind of like a share price of the entire thing. So imagine that you could buy, imagine Google, but every keyword in Google would have its own share. So Google will be not selling shares of Alphabet or Google, but you could buy into the shares of each individual keyword in Google, and then you would be using these shares to kind of display your links in there. How much would you pay for these shares? You would pay accordingly to the amount of traffic and attention these keywords are getting. So this is basically the effect that we're hoping to get and test out with the application we're building. So then you have this graph, and what's important to say that these are not, the economic networks will not be next social networks. Like social networks are networks where the behaviors are social. Everybody has one like, everybody has one identity. In this model, one person, one yourself, one can have many economic identities. It's like kind of like coming back to websites. You could have many websites with many different links, and just like you don't know who's behind this website. Website is valuable, it has good content, you just go to these websites. So the same thing could happen here. You can have many economic identities. We're not focusing our model, at least yet, on the kind of one person, one address model. You can create many of them because the backing, the token is limited. So the decisions you make and the reputation you have is just basically limited by the amount of tokens you have, or the amount of people with tokens you can convince to back you. You know, that's the key thing. And yeah, is this the decentralized social network? No, this will not be decentralized social networks. This will be like it could be a curation layer of existing social networks. So it's like, imagine you have a website that was created in 1995 and it's still there. It's still in 2016. And so first, like, you know, with Google, it got this kind of backlinks from other websites. And then the Facebook came, and the website is still there. And then it starts getting likes. It's being shared on Facebook. So then you have this curation layer of social links that are coming to this website. So in the same way, what we're imagining with user feeds is the same website could potentially get economic links. So there will be timestamps with people linking from the economic network to these websites, which will be, it's a new way to discover this website through this lens. It's an additional layer which is not excluding the existing networks. And this is the motivations will be economic, and these networks will be very biased, subjective, and self-promoting. You know, just go to every token or cryptocurrency Reddit and see what's happening there. And this is the same thing that's happened. Go to any startup event. People who are invested in something will try to convince you that their thing is the best. And that's good. This is how this works. This is how the world works. You cannot force people to be objective on the social networks, you know, being objective related to your kids or to your investments. You're going to be always subjective. But what we need to know to properly rank your statements is to knowing if you have skin in the game somewhere. Because I want to know that. If you're telling me something, I want to know how you're invested. And this is what this entire model should reveal, because right now, it's all hidden. You don't know that. Like content is disconnected from the economic incentives. So how these curators can make money? And it's a very valid question. And there are many scenarios in which curators can make money. It's a question like, how website owners make money. There are many ways to make money, but I just want to run you through example. So imagine a curator in the Ethereum network that has just one ether, or even less. But through their curation work, they received a lot of backing. So now they are backed by 100,000 ether backing them. So because of that reputation, in one of the applications, they are very visible. So they have a lot of, they are the Kim Kardashian of the Ethereum network. They get a lot of attention. So what they do, they issue a new token, which is called Promoted. And in this token, they have 100% of ownership. And because of all the attention they have, and everybody sees that, suddenly, it's as if I have a website which has a lot of traffic, and I open a new website. I'm linking to another website, but in this website, I'm basically selling these tokens myself. So if you want to get access to this reputation and attention, you can buy these tokens from me, or I can sell it to you, and you can use this token to kind of advertise your product, or your token, or whatever you want to promote, whatever you want to drive attention to, is going to be here. And basically, then it's connected to my reputation, because everybody can see these relationships between the tokens on the blockchain. So this guy has this new token, and the value of this token will depend on attention and reputation here, basically. This way, you can convert whatever you accumulated here, basically attention, reputation accumulated here, into money, because then you can, it's basically like advertising really works. However, if you're a celebrity on Instagram today, Instagram owns your social graph, and here you own your social graph, and money and social graph are the same thing. Like, there's money being transferred, money, attention, and reputation are transferred over the same network. Or you can have another scenario when the same situation here, but you're selling your token. You can sell half of it on the market. You can introduce investors, and I'm saying like, okay, so I'm releasing this token. I'm very popular here. So whatever I publish here, these guys will look into it. Like, imagine if this is Vitalik, and Vitalik has this promoted token, and people can publish stuff here. And it's going to be kind of like vouched by him because he made money off of it. So he's going to make sure that, who he sells this token to. But 50% can be owned by the public, So maybe he can only make the curation decisions on this token, but you can benefit from the appreciation of the price of it. Again, the same question as with, how many shares of Google's keyword, like how much would you pay for shares in keywords in Google, in 1998? You would probably try to calculate how much traffic will be on these keywords. Basically, the same mechanisms we assume could happen in this model. And now coming to the next layer of the protocol, which is the application layer. And right now, all the social networks look like this. There are silos. There are silos with closed data layers on the curation graph, identity, rankings, filters. Everything is closed in the silo. And the silo is owned by a company that is registered somewhere. It has investors. So these guys also, their only reason for being is to generate network effects. Because if they generate a network effect, the network grows and the investors can make money. The problem is for you as an individual, it's like whatever you contributed to the closed data layer here, you cannot transition over here. It's like your Facebook likes have no impact on your Twitter reputation. You cannot take your Twitter reputation here. Facebook will happily give you all your photos in a zip file, all your comments, everything you posted on Facebook, but they will give it to you that for free. Happily, you can download it, all of that. But they won't give you a social graph. You cannot take your likes out of Facebook. No, you created them because that was valuable, the graph. Because then you can extract really value for investors. And that's the model that we have here. In our model, this looks very, very different. So you have one layer, open data layer, with identities, links, and relationships between curators, tokens, and content, which is public, which is timestamped, which is organized on the blockchain. It's visible to everyone. Everybody can look at it, and everybody can create applications that provide to the end user, they provide a view into the platform. Because the user will never look at, if you go to Facebook, you never look at the entirety of the Facebook database. You just look at the view that the application gives you. But there is no competition. Like, you cannot create your own newsfeed. Like, newsfeed is built by Facebook. I cannot come in and say, I want to access your social graph to build my better newsfeed with different ranking rules. No, it's impossible. But in our model, these application providers play a very important role. They can use their own subjective ranking systems. They can create all sorts of lists and discovery models built on this graph. And depending on the attention, they also compete for attention. They also want to get traffic, because if traffic flows through their application to discover the blockchain, they also have a lot of ways of making money. So applications will compete for traffic. It's in the same way as exchanges or blockchain explorers compete for traffic using the same data layer of the blockchain. But the small difference in our model is that all blockchain explorers, you expect them to show you the same thing. Because that's what blockchain explorers do. They want to show you the objective reality of the state of the network. In this case, all applications are providing different filters for the network. So they will actually compete. Every one of them will show you a different way of filtering the network. And they might be like what you know as features. Like if you go to Facebook, you're going to have a news feed, going to be featured, you might like just photos. And you consider them one application. In here, every provider can be a different application can provide you with a different view on the network, like top authors, trending, just photos, whatever. Their economic goal, their economic incentives is to maximize attention they get. So they actually compete. So today, again, the Facebook example, if you go to Facebook and you have the events tab, or you might like these guys, these are owned by the same company within the same interface. Imagine if they start competing, so there's not one Facebook, there is just one data layer and different views of discovering kind of the same thing. And with user feeds, we want to be in the middle. Like right now, actually, we are building some demo application to kind of prove the model. But you need a middleware, like a layer that will be kind of, scanning the blockchain and providing APIs and easy ways for all these application creators to access the blockchain and build on top. So in this way, you can have, again, the Twitter example. As you can have Twitter, so you can have different views of Twitter. So you can have an Ethereum view of Twitter, and you can have some other token view of Twitter. And then essentially will be two different Twitters, kind of unbundled from Twitter. Or it can be even kind of traditional publishers like New York Times, BuzzFeed, CoinDesk, which give you a list of articles, you go to their site. But you can imagine an application built on this model, which will give you all the articles from this website, but also ranked in a different way than the original website. So what we're saying is that we are not really thinking about decentralizing the social network. We're just existing social networks. What we're saying is that you can unbundle the component of curation only. And because curation is so valuable, you can basically do for Facebook, Google, and all the other networks what they did to traditional publishers. They unbundled discovery in a way that you no longer go to the publisher's site. You go to Facebook and they point you to the publisher's site when they want, because they have the curation graph. If this model works, the same thing can happen again. The more tokens you own, the more you'll be using this type of discovery to discover information relevant to these tokens. Basically unbundling curation from the existing sites. You will still end up on Twitter at some point, but because you are discovering them through an external site, the value will flow to whatever is the closest to the user's attention. And we think that this model will be closer because it provides the incentive to the user to be a stakeholder in the network they own. Like, the more they use it, the more they promote it, the more valuable these tokens become. And now, as we're coming to the end of this presentation, it's my favorite part. The kind of game theoretical model behind all of this. If you want to build a model like that, you need to design a system where curators are encouraged to stay truthful to their beliefs, so they are not trying to game the system, which is very hard. Like, Google is being gamed all the time, Facebook is being gamed all the time, so it's really hard to avoid game playing. So I'm going to try to cheat this application and do some all sorts of tricks to get myself more visible. So how do we've been thinking about this for a really long time. This is crucial to this model, really, for the long-term success of this model, is that really we have all these different layers of curation. So you can think about all the layers above, curating the layers below. So you have curators who try to link to content in a way that will be most valuable to the applications. Because applications really, what they design ranking algorithms that will pick up the most valuable curators. And at the same time, users are voting with their attention. Like, they will flow, over the long term because everybody can create an app. Users will find the application that gives them the best return on their attention. ROA, return on attention, so like a return on investment, But if you have finite attention, you need to allocate it somewhere. So you're going to flow to the apps that are doing the best job for you. So the question is, what is the strategy and this is the question that kind of explains all that. If you're starting here, this is the axis of time, and you're a creator over here, a curator. And you start building up your reputation, and you're playing the long game. Like, you believe that your history will stay with you for 10 years, 20 years. You want to play the long game. And you know that applications will be getting more intelligent. And in 10 years, everything that you did will be analyzed by a super intelligent AI that will pick up any act of cheating that happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Because you can assume that these apps will evolve. They will be evolving really quickly. And the more attention is coming to the system, there's more incentive to build better apps. And these apps will be, so it's, for you with your reputation, it's hard to build it. It's very hard to accumulate it. Because, the earlier you start, the better off you are, the longer history of reputation you have, but it's very easy to lose it. So even the act of cheating somewhere here will be, you can assume that if you are behaving strategically, you're trying to game the system somewhere, maybe you're not going to be caught tomorrow. Maybe you're not going to be caught in a year. But you can assume you're going to be caught by some super intelligent AI at some point. Why? Because as the amount of information grows, and the intelligence of application grows, and the filtering models and so on and so forth, the filtering will be stricter and stricter. So because the attention is still the same, they will have to filter out more and more and more and more information. So they will try to look for curators and signals who are spotless, who provide the biggest return on attention for people who are living in a world where there is 1,000 times more information than today. And we're going to get there in 5 to 10 years, probably, given the exponential trend we're on, AIs that are producing content, and so on and so forth. Think about, this is the crucial thing of this model. If you have all these things separated, because right now on Facebook, I can try to game Facebook, because I know that this is not an open data set. Of course, Facebook can catch me, but I can start another account. And the same thing can, of course, can happen here. And you can start many times, but every time you start with a new curator, you're starting later on in the game. So probably, like theoretically, you can assume that people with the longest history of reputation, with the most truthful behaviors, truthful is a kind of game theoretical term. Like, they're not playing strategically, they are basically revealing their true preferences in the system. Should be the ones who are rewarded the most by the, super intelligent AI or whatever filtering mechanisms, emerge, because this is going to be public anyway. And we are not really concerned who you are, like as a person. You can be the address. Your identity in the system is really your pattern of behaviors. And doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. It's whether in a particular paradigm you're providing the most value to the. You're curating the web in a way that's providing the biggest return on attention for the end users. So again, the question is like, it's a very interesting question. How would you behave? Like, what content should you link to today? And knowing that the filtering in 10 years will be very hard, and probably you will be, because you are really competing for not being filtered out, you're competing for visibility. So what should you do today to be visible in this system, or for the super intelligent AI to consider you worth showing to other people? And my answer is, and I don't know if it's the right answer, is like, you should kind of reveal your best self, Whatever is average, whatever is repeatable, like, cat photos, baby photos, something that's relevant only for today, it's not relevant tomorrow. Basically what Facebook is optimizing for, kind of quick extraction of attention. That all, if you're just doing something like that, you will be filtered out really quickly. But if you're revealing something that's unique to you, that's original, then you have a chance of getting through the filter, because everything that's average and repeatable will be really filtered out because that's not unique. These systems will look for novelty. Yeah, this is kind of the, like, even if we start very simple over here with a very simple filtering rule, still this, and of course there will be people who will be trying to game this, but I'm just talking about the long-term game theoretical element of this model. And I now just want to give you a quick demo of the prototype we're building for Twitter. And I put this star over here. It's a barely working thing, no UX. There are issues with the testnet on Ethereum right now, so it's like I cannot show you things that I wanted to show you, but just still. So we're designing. So the experience and the UX is gonna change, but it's gonna be like a feed. You have a curator overview. It's like an address on the Ethereum network. And the curator can be, yeah. So you have a curator, he has an address. He has some backing, like, you can back them, like, so you can make a transaction that's backing them. And then you have a list of tweets that were endorsed by this curator. So it's like really like a feed. And you can discover this content. This tweet was endorsed by this guy, just one curator for this piece of content. So every tweet has a list of endorsements. So this is like, a tweet by Tim Sweeney, the Epic Games, Unreal Engine, and he tweeted, future social media should be rooted on a blockchain like Ethereum. Then all algorithms would be public and all curation outcomes auditable. I just saw this tweet while I was working on the presentation, and I thought it was really interesting. So for the demo, we kind of endorsed that. It's on the testnet, but this tweet could be endorsed. And so, for instance, then if you imagine you want to discover tweets on the production application, this tweet should rank really high for you. And otherwise, probably you wouldn't see it on a normal Twitter. Yeah, so you have this list. Yeah, so and now you can add a new one and then endorse. We're using MetaMask, so we have the Chrome plugin. You're choosing the account that is assigned to MetaMask, and you're putting in another tweet. This is by Vitalik, and we press endorse. So what's happening? You have to confirm it. It's a MetaMask client. So as you can see, there is 0 Ether, and this is really important. We're not sending any Ether. There's 0 Ether transaction. You just pay the transaction fee, and just accept it. Yeah, and it goes on the blockchain, and it should pop up in this feed. Because we had testnet issues, I'm not going to show you, like, then basically the application is picking this up, and it should show at the top for the curator overview. I'm just showing you this as an example. It's not going to be released in this form to the public, even the kind of alpha testing public. But if you want to be one of the first testers, please sign up on our website. So we're going to send you an invitation once we're ready. You have to have some Ether, but it doesn't have to be a lot, just to kind of test the model. And there will be, we are hoping, if you're working on a project, also, if you're developing a dApp on Ethereum, and you need an index, store, or any kind of a list that should be ordered somehow, and you want to do it in a decentralized fashion, probably you can use our system to kind of generate that. So just please let me know if you have a problem like that. So, you could plug into our system at some point. And that's basically it. Again, we're looking for testers, we're looking for feedback. We know that most of these things can be only tested in the real world. We can argue, we don't know. That's our assumption how the model should work. So, but we want to explore that. We want to see what's going to happen. And I want to just give some acknowledgements, because this space of kind of attention and social networks, it's a still very small space in the kind of Ethereum world. So I just want to give kind of acknowledgements to people who kind of influenced this model at different stages of its existence, or even conceptually. We've been exchanging ideas on Twitter. This is Kuba, who really kind of was one of the contributors to user feeds at some point this year. There's Simon, who's working on the concept of hashtag markets. I think he changed it to the meme markets. He's approaching kind of the same problem, but for a very different angle. Follow him on Twitter if you want to find out more. There's Maciej Roy, who is he's a host of Epicenter. It was previously Epicenter Bitcoin, of the I think one of the best podcasts in this space. And he's now, we spend a lot of time in Shanghai at DEF CON discussing these things. And he's approaching, again, the same problem space, but from his own angle. He's working on some valuations of crypto tokens based on kind of attention they can get. Super interesting stuff. Follow him on Twitter. And he also gave a similar presentation on the similar topic a couple days ago in Berlin. But basically, that's it. Thank you for your time, and and maybe time for questions. Thank you.
First, I'm a layman. I'm not a computer guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I understand it, what you were presenting was an enhanced pricing mechanism in a way. And to what extent do you see it being applied to other areas beyond these virtual tokens? For example, capital markets, or I don't know, maybe real estate. Let's go far.
Capital, if you want to go into the theory of it a little bit, it's we are used to the concept of money, which is backed by some scarce commodities, and in the past, money backed by gold was something everybody understands, gold is finite, and so we can peg our money to it, and then it's it's worth something. There is backing of gold. But this entire concept is based on the idea that, as we transition to the information age, and we have there's a lot of money being printed by the governments right now. So there's too much capital in the world. Even though it's not evenly distributed, there's too much of it. So money is not scarce anymore. Production, like we have robots, like, you have AI coming soon, which you can unbundle like creativity from human consciousness. You can unbundle work because robots can do the work. So it's like, but there is this one scarcity that all these companies like are dealing with. Like, it's attention, really. Like, you can only pay attention to so many things. And before you buy something, before you do anything, like purchase a product, say something, comment, like, whatever, it has to get into your field of view. And so all these things are really like, I presented this as a kind of, content, social media, advertising concept, but it's a very deep financial concept that the future of currency are attention-backed assets. So like, you can watch Mayer's talk about this because he's focusing more on the kind of monetary aspects of it, but that the future currencies will be the attention-backed currencies. So you can imagine, that your reputation in something and your money will be the same thing. Sounds very abstract, I know, but...
So it's not attention, that's reputation, that's real.
It's reputation that is translated into attention, really, because like if your website has a lot of reputation in Google's application, then it's really on the first, then it ranks highly, and if it's on the top, people will click on it, and it's this thing, like, everybody uses Facebook, social media, and you scroll your news feed and you are seeing things, but you are not thinking about the 99.9% of things you didn't see. Like, they will filter it out by Facebook, and this is extremely valuable to get seen, and it will become more and more valuable. So this model really, like, we're starting like. I don't want to go, very abstract with these talks because it's hard. It's hard enough to explain this to people anyway. Like most people, when I try to explain this thing, they're like, "Well, I know, yeah, cool, fine. I don't get it." But all these tokens, if these mechanisms I presented work, these tokens are really becoming attention-backed assets because you can trade them, and they have very inherent property. They can use them for getting attention of people invested in the token. And if you think that today you're paying Google to get attention of people getting into Google, you're paying Facebook to get attention of people working on Facebook, and these companies are extremely valuable. Like if you look at, I saw this chart of companies that, what were the most valuable companies 10 years ago? And they were like, Exxon and, General Motors, and now you're like the most valuable companies in 2016. And it's like, Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon. It's like, and Google and Facebook are the most obvious ones. And you can argue about the others. These are attention trading companies. That's it. Like they trade attention. They're middlemen. They're aggregating attention on one side and selling access to this attention on the other. But they aggregate all of that. In this model, the same mechanism should happen. Like we don't know. We'll be testing that. But on a very smaller scale, on the level of the token. So there will be not... there won't be other Google, like a big Google. There will be many other Googles, kind of. And of course, like the reaggregation of that can happen at some point. It always happens. The cycle of technology is the cycle of centralization, decentralization, centralization. But like we are at the peak centralization, we think. And we think like what's going to happen with this, at least like, this unbundling has to happen at some point. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a financial... There is a financial idea behind it.
Okay, thanks. It was good.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi. We talked a lot about intention, and I want to ask you something. You said that things that are very average and common won't appear on the upper parts of the social media, let's call it like that. But there is a reason why people love to see cats or love to see small children, because maybe it's average and not unique, but it has some sentimental feeling. It has its importance. So it's a philosophical question. So what do you think when planning your algorithm? Because not everyone is unique. Not everyone can create special content. And still people want these simple, cute cats in their feed. So how do you tackle it?
No, it's a really good question. And of course, these things, I was, I was thinking there is still place for social media. It's not gonna. Facebook didn't remove Google and keyword-based search. Social media is gonna stay here. People respond to these things. People will care about their families and their photos and all of that. That's for sure. And I'm not saying that's gonna go away. But in the context of what we're building, your attention is a scarce resource. You're investing. If you have 1 million of tokens, imagine like right now you have, you go to CoinMarketCap, you have hundreds of tokens, and you can kind of focus on the top 10. Imagine a world where there is like the entire crypto valuation is like, hundreds of billions of dollars. You have millions of tokens, and you have tens of thousands of tokens being released, like, new websites being released every day. And you have limited attention. So the question is, and you have to use some heuristics, some signals, like how should I allocate it? And this is what I'm saying, the person who will be providing you the most unique insight in the context of your attention understood as a scarce resource will win. It's like, imagine how you invest your money. People who go to Facebook, they don't today consider themselves investing their attention. It doesn't work like that. They're like, okay. They feel bad. Oh, I wasted time very often, but they don't consider this as an investment. And in the context of these networks, that there are...
have to be active because...
there are alternatives. There's like, am I getting the best information right now? Am I getting the best return on my attention right now? Yeah, and that's a different layer. And social networks will exist. You will always pay attention to your mom, to your friends, to your that's gonna stay. But I think this purpose is being served by existing social networks quite well. Maybe they will evolve sometimes. This is a different thing. This is like, I have attention, I have some capital, and it's like I'm getting all these signals, and how I should allocate it in the context of the economic competition, where I know that those people will kind of compete to make me pay attention to them. So they're not exclusive, these applications. Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
So I'm testing that everything is quite cheap, but if you try to run the endorsements with the URLs on the mainnet and actually have to pay money for it, it's going to be very expensive. So what are your plans for doing this some of these things off-chain? Because obviously endorsements can be as a easy DSA signature of the URL, plus perhaps a nonce or something like that. It doesn't feel like something that should be on the blockchain.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a scalability question, basically, and we think about it. And I can give you some random answers right now, but no, actually relevant answers. But we haven't thought about it as deeply as we should, because at this stage we just want to taste the model with the current, even on the Ethereum mainnet. Like at this point, we can assume that with this, the model can prove itself with the current transaction fees. So, for instance, because if you're using the EVM and you have a certain account system, so you can have all these kind of endorsements. You can imagine like a side chain or like another chain or like a private chain using the same accounts and timestamping their endorsements over there, because it really kind of goes to the database anyway. So you just need to prove that somebody with a private key did something. So, so you can imagine you have a side chain or like a separate Ethereum EVM chain. Of course, there's a question of security, how that would be mined, whether it's secure or not, but it could be a kind of a single purpose chain only for these endorsements. So everything else happens on the kind of the monetary transactions and smart contracts. It happens on the main Ethereum chain. All these endorsements, which are really just kind of reputation, because this reputation is calculated off-chain anyway, and every application has its own reputation. So that could be some way to tackle it. Of course, there is sharding, which is coming, and all the kind of Ethereum scalability issues which people are thinking of anyway. And we think we can, by the time we need kind of cheaper transactions, we can hop on that. So I'm not worried. Like that will be a good problem to have. Like if we get adoption, but the transactions are too expensive. But it's a very valid question.
We are talking about the cost of the backing the content. Yeah? For me, it's not a problem; it's a solution for for nothing at stake attack, because you're saying that we are clicking some button and it's our attention. We can create a bot which will click a lot of buttons. We can just collect Ether for just 1 second to back something and then return it to other accounts. And so what's your approach? How you want to the biggest problem in all blockchain based applications is like connecting them to the real world. To how can you connect your real attention to the blockchain?
If I understood the question correctly, it's like, what if bots become curators and they start basically linking all over the place? And that's.
Yeah, I can just click and it costs me nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm not sending any Ether. So maybe the actually, if it will cost me something, it will be good for the network.
No, it will cost you the transaction fee. So there is a limit, of course. But I think your question is related to the kind of the nature of the system I'm describing. So how this will affect the system. So first of all, like if you're just randomly spamming the network, one of the applications, and just gonna quit that. The apps will filter for that. So you can be considered a fraud, and of course you can start doing that, from another account. But still, you need to own some Ether, like to do this, So and this Ether, you cannot multiply your Ether.
But I can multiply, use the Ether many times in 1 second.
Yeah, but if you own one Ether, or if you own 10 Ether, of course you can transfer to another account and then start. Yes. But it's still 10 Ether, which some application.
But I have very fast bot, and you will even pay me to do this because I will back you and.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try to answer this question. So
go ahead.
So imagine that you have 4 pieces of a cake, and you are saying that you'll give 1 piece of this cake to Maciej. Mm-hmm. And 3 others to someone else. And if you want to back the 5th person, the next person, you can't. It costs you nothing. You pay nothing, but you have to prove that you have this cake. So you have to take it from Maciej and put it over there. And
I'm not passing any.
No, you are not passing, but you are so when you are making a transaction, you are actually signifying that you are willing to.
We check if the Ether is still there.
When they are checking actually who is backing whom, they are just looking at the latest state. They are not looking at the history of.
We can look at the history, but from the perspective of this particular transaction, we will see that, of course, you made these transactions, no Ether was being transferred, so the links are still there, but there is no energy, there is no backing behind these links. So of course you transferred it to the new one, and we're gonna see that this guy who was spamming, now it's all visible, it's all connected. So of course then you can go to maybe Shapeshift and get this Ether, kind of.
Vector of attack, but I can use one account to back many content in a second.
Yes, you can do that, but it costs you money, and from the game, it costs you to do that. And of course, you can run a bot.
Fees,
yes,
fees.
Yeah, it costs you fees, and it's very easy to filter. Of course, you can spam one application. But from the kind of long-term point of view, you know that somebody will pick. It's a nuisance attack. You're going to spam somebody's app, or you can build an app that mitigates those things in some ways. So of course, it's possible.
You do this all the time on the Facebook. How many times you click to, you don't like this the content, but you don't want to spoil your relationship with someone, or just it's the transmission between your attention and this announcement isn't that 1-to-1. It's always something which is gameable.
No, so
You know,
of
the
course.
clickbait, the
Of cour-
clickbait problem.
of course you can.
is
Similar
similar to this.
Of course you can game it. So this is what I explained on the last slides. The system definitely will be exploited, but from the kind of long-term game theoretical assumptions. At least from our perspective, it pays off to play fair because you will be rewarded, and this will be punished at some point. Of course, like you're providing more data for the spam filters doing that. So it's this essentially the same thing that's happening now with like the kind of DDoSing the Ethereum network.
Very, very big, like you are very confident in people long-term thinking, and
I don't know. Like maybe it's not going to work. Like maybe you're right. Like we think this is kind of this is possible to be mitigated with many approaches because every app can filter you out. Like they can decide that we're filtering this guy. App can be decided that only people with backing of thousands of Ether can be visible. So then your model so if you have a lot of backing, you start spamming, people remove backing, and that's it. And if you have a lot of Ether behind you, you want to kind of keep that reputation, of course. And so you can put a threshold in a very initial applications, and then you can lower this threshold if you're confident that you can design a spam filter for that.
there is a threshold like this in many like cases like U.S. Presidential elections, when you rather people who have more money can enter the race, and we all see how this works.
Yeah,
now,
this is
so okay.
This is system
I'll
based
pass
on
the
money.
mic to the another.
Economic networks are based on money. Like this is not. But in this case, everybody can produce this money. So this is the same thing. You can create a token and give it all to yourself, and if it gets attention, it will get valuable. Like if it gets network effect. So yeah, this is the system based on money, where everybody can create money. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, I'll be around. So yeah, feel free to come over, give feedback. Thank you for your time. Thanks.